The rain started 5 minutes before the wedding. Soft at first, then sharp enough to rattle against the tall windows of the old Wellington chapel. It made the place feel colder than it already was, as if the building itself wanted to whisper a warning to everyone inside. Sonia adjusted the thin strap of her gown while standing behind the half-closed wooden door that separated her from the altar. She felt the weight of eyes she hadn't met yet. She had imagined her wedding day many times, but none of those versions included fear coiled tight in her stomach or the quiet reminder that she didn't love the man waiting for her. Or even know him, really. Paul Wellington. The heir to a fortune she used to see only on magazines she couldn't afford to buy. He stood at the altar like someone rehearsing a scene from a life he didn't want. His face was calm, too calm, controlled to the point that the air around him felt engineered. When she finally walked out, the room fell silent, not because she looked beautiful, though she did, but because everyone in that chapel knew something she didn't, or thought they did. The vows were short, efficient, nothing tender, nothing personal. Sonia tried to find softness in Paul's eyes, something that suggested reassurance or even polite warmth, but all she saw was distance. It felt like he was performing the bare minimum required to get through the moment. He held her hand only when he had to, and even then, his grip felt like the cold press of a business agreement. After the ceremony, he leaned close, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "One rule," he said. "You never go into my study without permission. Ever." She blinked. "Why would I?" "It's not up for discussion." His tone didn't rise, didn't harden, didn't tremble. That made it worse. It felt like a wall sliding down between them. She nodded, because she had no choice, because this marriage was her way out of poverty, out of the life where she worked 2 jobs and still couldn't save her father from illness, out of a future that looked too much like the past she was running from. But she didn't know yet that she was stepping into another kind of cage. That night, instead of a honeymoon suite filled with warmth or laughter, Paul handed her a folder. Inside was his father's will. A line stood out immediately. For Paul to inherit the Wellington legacy, he must remain married for at least 12 months, or the estate transfers to Daniel Wellington. Paul didn't explain. He didn't need to. The conditions said almost everything. Almost. One sentence further down made her pause. In the event of marital dissolution, intentional breach, or proven misconduct, especially from the spouse, the estate transfer becomes immediate. Suspicion crawled under her skin, slow and cold. Why would a billionaire patriarch include a clause like that? Why emphasize the spouse's fault? Why warn so specifically that she could ruin everything? She looked up at Paul. "Why would your father word it this way? It sounds like he expected something to go wrong." Paul didn't answer. He only buttoned his shirt cuffs with quiet precision. "This marriage has rules," he said. "Stick to them, and you'll get through the year." "And if I don't?" He looked at her then, really looked at her. "Then you won't like what follows." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise shaped like truth. The beginning of a marriage tied to a fortune she didn't ask for, a man she didn't understand, and a hidden past that didn't intend to stay buried. Outside, the rain kept falling, as if trying to drown the lies before they surfaced. But lies don't drown. They wait. The Wellington mansion stretched like a museum. Wide corridors, polished marble, chandeliers that whispered old money. Sonia had cleaned houses like this before. Being expected to live in one felt strange enough. Being married into it felt unreal. Paul walked ahead without speaking. He led her through the hallways until they reached the main living room. Daniel Wellington stood there. Tall, easy smile, smooth voice. Everything about him felt warm at first glance, but the kind of warmth that could scorch if you got too close. Welcome to the family, Sonia. He kissed her hand a little too slowly. My cousin has interesting taste. Paul's jaw tightened. Don't start. Daniel raised both hands. Just being friendly. But Sonia caught the flicker in his eyes when they moved to Paul. The rivalry wasn't just family tension, it felt active, like a fire waiting for the right fuel. Later that afternoon, while the staff prepared dinner, Daniel found Sonia alone in the garden. You're aware he didn't choose you by chance, right? She stared at him. What are you talking about? That will you saw. His smile dipped. It wasn't written for a faceless bride. It was written with a specific type of woman in mind. That doesn't make sense. Daniel looked at her in a way that made her feel seen and hunted at the same time. Your father worked for our family years ago. Her breath caught. My father never mentioned. Of course he didn't. He was loyal, too loyal. Your connection is deeper than you think. Sonia felt her heartbeat spike. What exactly are you trying to say? That you weren't a random pick. Someone made sure your name landed in the right place at the right time. She wanted to deny it, but she remembered how suddenly the marriage offer came, how quickly her father insisted she accept, how desperately he tried to hide his fear while pretending it was excitement. Daniel kept talking, voice soft enough to slip under her skin. Ask Paul to tell you what happened 12 years ago. Ask him why his father didn't trust him, and ask him who Elena was. There it was, a name she hadn't heard before but instantly hated. When she asked Paul that night, he gave her nothing but silence. Sonia realized that she had walked into a house where every corridor carried a story no one wanted to say out loud. Later that day, she wandered through the mansion and found a portrait room. She studied the Wellington family line, serious faces, hard eyes, pride that looked like it never loosened. One portrait stood out. A woman, sharp cheekbones, soft eyes that held a secret. Someone had tried to remove her plaque, but the imprint remained faintly under the frame. Elena. The name Daniel whispered in the garden. She leaned closer, studying the woman's expression. Something about the portrait felt unfinished, like the painter caught her in a moment she wasn't supposed to reveal. You shouldn't be in this room. Paul's voice cut through the silence. Sonia turned. He stood at the entrance, shoulders tight, eyes colder than she'd seen all week.
I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Just stay out of here. Why? Who is she? He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped past her and pulled a cover over the portrait with a single motion, almost like reflex. Let it go, he said. Paul, if she's part of your family history, why? Not everything in this house is for discussion. He walked out before she could say anything else, but the way his hand shook when he pulled the cover told her more than his words. Elena wasn't a small story. She was a fault line running through the Wellington legacy. Later that night, Sonia overheard two staff members whispering at the far end of a hallway. They didn't see her. I thought they said she left. No one leaves like that, the older one whispered. She disappeared. Sonia's breath stilled. Mr. Paul hasn't been the same since. That's why he... They fell silent when they noticed her. Sonia walked away, pretending she didn't hear anything, but the words lodged themselves in her mind. She disappeared. He hasn't been the same. Now, Elena wasn't just a name, she was a shadow in every corner of the mansion, and Paul was living with something he didn't know how to bury. That night, Sonia lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She had entered this house as an escape, as a desperate attempt to fix a life falling apart. Instead, she found herself inside a story that tightened around her with every new piece she learned. A missing woman, a cold husband with wounds he refused to show, a marriage tied to a will, and a cousin who enjoyed stirring everything. If the mansion had windows open at night, Sonia was sure the past would slip in like wind and sit at the foot of her bed until she acknowledged it. By the time sleep finally found her, she knew something clearly. Paul wasn't distant out of habit, he was distant because loving someone meant risking something he never wanted to risk again, and Elena was the reason why. 2 days later, the storm began, not with thunder, not with a scandal, but with a phone call. It came in the late afternoon, just as Sonia was stepping out of the library. The staff phone on the corridor desk rang a sharp, short ring that echoed through the quiet house. The maid answered, paused, looked confused, then handed the phone to Sonia with a worried expression. "They asked for you." Sonia hesitated before lifting the receiver. "Hello?" A voice she didn't recognize came through. Low, distorted, slow enough to sound intentional. "You're next." Her heart stopped. What? What happened to Elena wasn't an accident. Be careful who you trust. The line went dead. The receiver slipped from her hand, hitting the wooden table with a soft thud. For a moment she couldn't breathe. The corridor felt too long, the lights too dim. Everything inside her trembled. She hadn't even processed the words before she felt someone behind her. She turned sharply. Paul. He had removed his tie, sleeves rolled up, jaw tense. The look in his eyes said he'd seen her face before she could hide the fear. What happened? She swallowed hard. Someone called. They said, "I'm next." His expression froze. It wasn't shock. It wasn't disbelief. It was something heavier. Recognition. She stepped closer. Paul, who would say something like that? And why mention Elena? What really happened to her? Paul looked away, rubbing his hand on the back of his neck. For once, the controlled mask slipped. "I should have changed the phone lines." "That's not an answer." He exhaled sharply and met her eyes. Elena didn't leave. She vanished. No goodbye, no message, nothing. "And you think someone took her?" Paul didn't reply, but the silence was loud enough. Sonia felt the fear settle deeper. "You need to tell me what's going on. And you need to stay away from Daniel." Her confusion sharpened. "Daniel? Why?" "He likes chaos, and he's good at creating stories that feel real. He's trying to use you." "For the inheritance?" "For the inheritance," Paul confirmed, "and for satisfaction." "Then why won't you tell me the truth?" Paul's jaw clenched again. "Because the truth is complicated and dangerous." He said it like he meant it, like he lived it. But before she could ask more, someone else stepped into the corridor. Daniel. Hands in pockets, smile too relaxed for the tension in the air. "Trouble in paradise?" Paul shot him a warning look. "Not now." Daniel ignored him and turned to Sonia. "You look pale. Did he finally tell you about Elena?" Paul stepped between them. "Daniel, I swear." "What, gonna threaten me in front of your wife? That would look bad for the family." Sonia spoke before Paul could respond. "Daniel, stop playing games. If you know something, say it." His smile faded. His eyes softened in a way she didn't expect. "Elena tried to expose something before she disappeared." Paul's shoulders stiffened. Daniel held Sonia's gaze. "And if you're not careful, you'll end up exactly where she did." Then he walked away, leaving the corridor soaked with silence that wrapped around Sonia like cold water. She turned to Paul. "What did she try to expose?" Paul didn't blink. "Something that doesn't concern you." "Paul!" "It ends here." His voice was quiet but firm. "Stay out of it. Stay away from Daniel, and don't answer any calls you don't recognize." He walked off, leaving her standing alone with a truth she couldn't ignore anymore.
Later that night, as Sonia walked through the West Wing, a sudden loud crack echoed above her. She looked up just in time to see the grand chandelier sway violently. One of the metal brackets snapped. It dropped 2 feet before the chain caught. Her knees almost buckled. Someone came running. Daniel. He stopped beside her, chest rising from the quick run. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, unable to speak. He looked up, studying the chandelier with a frown. Strange. Maintenance was done recently. Strange wasn't the word. Terrifying fit better. Paul arrived next, breath tight, eyes scanning her quickly. Did it hit you? Sonia, look at me. She nodded but could barely form words. He touched her shoulder, gentle. Come on, let's get you out of here. Daniel watched them walk away with a soft smile. Not friendly, not concerned. Something else. Something calculating. That night, Sonia couldn't sleep. Not because the chandelier almost fell, but because the look in Daniel's eyes afterward didn't belong to a man who was surprised. It belonged to someone checking whether a plan worked. Gradual danger had arrived, and it was coming from inside the house. Sonia woke before sunrise the next morning, restless and replaying last night's close call. She kept seeing the chandelier in her mind, the slow sway, the drop, the way the chain barely caught in time. She wasn't sure if it was a warning or an accident, but she knew one thing clearly. Someone wanted her uneasy. Someone wanted her vulnerable. Paul didn't leave his study that morning, but she sensed him moving behind the closed door. The rule, his only rule, echoed in her head. Never enter without permission. She tried to push the thought aside, but the memory of the staff whispering about Elena kept returning. The anonymous call, Daniel's words, the portrait, the way Paul's hand shook. Everything connected to one place, his study. She spent most of the morning pacing, trying to convince herself to respect the boundary, trying not to give in, trying to be patient, but patience felt useless in a house that kept secrets like this one. By noon, she gave in. Her heartbeat thudded loudly as she pushed the door open. The study smelled faintly of cedar and old books. Nothing sinister, nothing violent, just controlled chaos. Documents piled in careful stacks, a map of the family estates, and a large locked drawer at the bottom of his desk. She scanned the room, searching for anything that tied to Elena. Nothing. Then she found a folder on the far table, slightly open, not locked, almost like it had been left out by accident. Inside was a copy of Elena's last communication, a photo of a torn letter. Only pieces of sentences remained. Telling the truth, proof against, can't trust. The last part was clearer than the rest. If something happens to me, don't let them bury the truth. A cold shiver went through Sonia's spine. Someone had tried to destroy this letter. Paul had pieced it back together. Before she could process that, she heard footsteps approaching. She snapped the folder shut. Too late. Paul stood at the doorway. The disappointment on his face didn't flare. It settled, quiet, heavy. You broke the only rule I gave you. His voice wasn't loud. That made it worse. Sonia swallowed. I needed answers. You needed patience. I wasn't giving you many. Paul stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. His eyes were sharp, but there was something else underneath. Hurt. You think I'm hiding things because I enjoy control? I think you're hiding things because you're afraid of what I might find. He stared at her for a long, unbroken moment. Then, without warning, something in him changed. His shoulders loosened. His voice softened. The night Elena disappeared, she left that letter in this room. Sonia's breath caught. She was scared, terrified. She kept saying someone was watching her, that someone was inside the family. Her chest tightened. And you believed her? I tried to. His jaw flexed, but I realized too late. They stood inches apart now. The study felt smaller with every word. It didn't leave me, Paul. She was taken from me, and I never forgave myself. Sonia felt something shift between them, slow, careful, fragile. She saw the pain he'd kept locked behind walls. She understood the coldness, the silence, the rule, everything. Paul exhaled deeply. I kept the study closed because I didn't want you dragged into the mess I failed to solve. But I'm already in it, she said. His eyes met hers, steady, searching, vulnerable. Yes, he admitted, you are. For the first time since their wedding, Paul's guard dropped, just a little, enough for her to see the man beneath the weight he carried. The moment was interrupted by a knock. A staff member opened the door slightly. "Sir, the police called. They've reopened your father's case." Paul stiffened. "Why?" "They said there's new evidence involving the night he died." The staff left. Paul turned back to Sonia. Her stomach twisted. The timing was no coincidence. Too many things were moving at once. Sonia whispered, "Paul, what exactly is happening?" He didn't answer, but she saw it in his eyes. Daniel wasn't just playing games. He was moving pieces, and the danger surrounding them wasn't distant anymore. It was here, in the walls, in the family, in the inheritance, in the truth about Elena, in the truth about Paul's father. Sonia understood one thing clearly as she stood there in his study. This marriage wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about staying alive long enough to uncover the truth. The house changed after the call from the police. It wasn't something Sonia could point to. It was in the air, the stillness, the way every footstep echoed a little longer than usual. Something inside the Wellington estate had shifted, like a locked door had finally then opened somewhere she couldn't see. Paul barely slept that night. She heard him pacing the hall long after midnight, stopping only when exhaustion forced him to sit. His mind was somewhere else, somewhere dark, old, and familiar.
By morning, Sonia found him in the study again, staring at the scattered documents he hadn't bothered to organize. He didn't look up. "They found new evidence in my father's case." "What kind of evidence?" He hesitated. "They didn't say. They want me to come in today." She stepped closer, quietly. "You're afraid it's connected to Elena?" A muscle in his cheek moved. He didn't deny it. "Let me come with you," she said. He finally lifted his eyes to her. Tired, guarded, but not distant, not anymore. "This is dangerous. You said I'm already in it." He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded once. "Get ready. We leave in an hour." The police station wasn't crowded, but the air felt thick. A detective led them into a room with a single light overhead. Thick files sat on the table. Detective Morris, a man with silver streaks in his beard, pushed one of the files toward Paul. "This was delivered anonymously last night." Paul opened the folder. Inside were printed photographs, grainy, dark. Each one showed the same image from a different angle. Elena, leaving the Wellington estate on the night she vanished. Except she wasn't alone. A man's figure stood beside her, tall, broad-shouldered. His face was turned away in every shot. Sonia leaned closer. "Is that—" "We can't confirm identity yet," Morris said, "but the timestamp matches the night your father died and the night Elena disappeared." Paul's hands tightened around the photos. This was 12 years ago. Who would release these now? Morris slid another item across the table. "A USB drive. This came with the photos. We checked it. The footage is old, corrupted in parts, but clear enough." He inserted it into a laptop. The video opened with static, then sharpened slowly. The Wellington garage. Headlights. Rain hitting the concrete. Elena ran into view. She looked panicked, turning back toward the mansion like she expected someone to follow her. A man came after her, grabbing her arm, pulling her back. Sonia held her breath. The footage glitched, then steadied. The man's face turned toward the camera. Paul's mouth dried. Sonia froze. "Daniel!" Detective Morris stopped the playback. "We need to confirm the full sequence, but this suggests she didn't leave willingly." Sonia whispered, "Paul, he lied." Paul didn't speak. His body was rigid, eyes locked on the screen like it was swallowing him whole. Morris continued, "Your father confronted someone that night too. That part isn't clear, but we believe the confrontation and Elena's disappearance are linked." Paul leaned forward. "Linked how?" "The new report suggests your father intended to change his will again. Someone didn't want that." Sonia's blood ran cold. Daniel, the timing, the claws, the attacks, the chandelier, the call, everything lined up.
Why didn't you tell the family any of this? Morris asked. Paul gave a tired, bitter sound. Because I didn't know. I thought Elena just left. I thought she walked out. I thought she chose. His voice cracked. He looked away fast, jaw tightening, shoulders rising as he tried to hold himself together. Sonia stepped closer to him without thinking. Morris closed the folder. There's more. The caller who warned your wife, we traced it. It came from a burner phone. Paul looked up sharply. And? It pinged off a cell tower 5 miles from your estate. The detective paused. And based on witness descriptions, it matches the same vehicle Daniel Wellington drives. The room fell into a silence so sharp it felt like a blade. Paul rose slowly from his chair. I want a protective order and surveillance on the house. Morris nodded. We've already assigned officers, but be careful. Whoever's been moving these pieces is getting bold. Outside, the sun was bright in a way that didn't match the weight in the air. Paul didn't speak on the drive home. His hands stayed on the steering wheel, knuckles tight, jaw clenched, mind racing. When they reached the mansion, Sonia followed him to the study. Talk to me, she said quietly. Paul stood there, breathing hard, trying to hold back everything he had learned. Daniel took her, he said. The words came out hoarse. He took Elena from me, and my father tried to stop him. That's why the will changed. That's why... He paused, voice shaking. That's why my father died that night. Sonia felt something inside her break for him. For the boy he used to be. For the man who had been punished for trying to love someone. For the truth he carried alone while the world called him cold. He rubbed his face over his face. All this time, I thought she left me. I thought I wasn't enough to make her stay. But she tried to warn me. She tried to tell me something was wrong. Sonia stepped closer, instinct guiding her more than thought. She placed her hand on his arm. He didn't flinch. For once, he didn't pull away. Paul, she whispered, you did the best you could with what you knew. No, he said. I failed her. You didn't fail her. Daniel betrayed you. He betrayed everyone, and now he wants to hurt you again through me. His eyes lifted to hers. Something raw and broken flickered there. Sonia, I'm sorry you're in this. She shook her head. I'm here now. We fight this together. The words surprised both of them. They felt true, solid, steady. He took a slow breath. Sonia, there's something else. She looked at him, waiting. This marriage, the will, it wasn't only about inheritance. Her heart skipped. What do you mean? Paul reached into the locked drawer, one she hadn't noticed until now, and placed a sealed envelope on the table. Elena gave this to my father before she disappeared. He never opened it. I found it later. He slid it toward her. It's addressed to you. The room tilted. What? I don't know why, Paul said, but Elena knew your father. She knew your name. She knew you would be part of this. Sonia stared at the envelope. Her name was written on it in elegant, hurried handwriting, as if Elena wrote it moments before she vanished. Paul stepped back slightly, watching her, steady and quiet. Whatever is inside that letter, he said softly, is the final piece of the truth. Sonia touched the envelope with trembling hands. She had walked into this marriage thinking she was escaping poverty. She didn't know she was walking into a mystery that started long before she ever stepped into the Wellington world. She didn't know her father had secrets tied to this family, and she didn't know opening that envelope would change everything about who she believed she was. She took a breath, then she opened it. The paper inside the envelope was thinner than Sonia expected, fragile, a little yellowed at the edges. It had been folded for years, maybe handled by scared hands. Paul stood close but didn't interrupt. He waited, his breathing controlled, eyes fixed on her face. Sonia unfolded the letter slowly. The handwriting was hurried, slanted, like Elena wrote it while looking over her shoulder. Sonia, if this reaches you, it means everything I feared is happening. Her pulse jumped. Your father was right. The deal he made with the Wellingtons was only safe for as long as he kept quiet. He warned me. I didn't listen. Sonia froze. Her father? Why would Elena mention her father? She kept reading. Someone here manipulates everything. Someone who makes people disappear if they stand in his way.
If anything happens to me, protect Paul." Her breath hitched. She looked up at Paul, who looked just as stunned as she felt. She continued, "I didn't run away. I didn't leave him. I was trying to save him." Her throat tightened. She wiped at her cheek without realizing tears had formed. Elena's last line stopped her heart. "Daniel killed your father to keep him silent." Sonia staggered back. "No, no." Paul reached out and steadied her arm. "Sonia." She shook her head, the room spinning. "Her father didn't die from illness like everyone said. He was silenced because he knew something about the Wellingtons, about Daniel, about the will, about Elena." Paul looked shattered. He took the letter gently from her hands and read it again, slower this time. "I never knew," he breathed. "Sonia, I'm so sorry." She felt weak, but the weakness didn't pull her down. It pushed something sharp into her chest, clarity, resolve, something stronger than fear. Everything made sense now. The urgency in her father's voice the last week before he died. The way he kept saying, "If something happens, don't trust everything you see."
The rushed decision to force her into a marriage contract. The reason Daniel hated her walking into the Wellington house. Her father hadn't abandoned her. He had tried to protect her, and he died for it. A deep, cold steadiness settled in her. "Paul," she whispered, "Daniel can't get away with this." Paul didn't answer at first. His jaw locked, his eyes darkened with the kind of fury he never let anyone see. "He won't," he said. There was a knock at the door. They both turned sharply. A staff member poked his head in. "Sir, your cousin is here. He said it's urgent." Paul and Sonia exchanged a look. Daniel never arrived without an agenda. They left the study together. Daniel waited in the living room like a man who owned the place. He leaned back, legs crossed, swirling a glass of whiskey with slow movements. When he saw them, he smiled. "Family meeting?" Paul didn't return the smile. "What do you want?" Daniel raised his brows. "Straight to the point. Good. Saves time." His eyes shifted to Sonia. They lingered longer than usual. "You've been busy, haven't you?" Sonia didn't react. Daniel stood up, setting his glass down with a soft click. "I heard the police reopened your father's case. Interesting timing." Paul stepped closer. "Not as interesting as you driving near the estate the night Sonia got that call." Daniel chuckled, not bothered. "Ah, they traced that? Technology these days." He didn't deny it. He looked at Sonia again. "So, you opened the letter, I assume." Her stomach tightened, but she didn't show it. Daniel smiled slowly. "You know, your father was a very loyal man. Stubborn, but loyal. Shame he didn't stay in his lane." Paul's voice dropped. "You murdered him." Daniel shrugged. "Big word. He became a problem. Problems get solved." The room grew colder. Sonia felt her hands curl into fists. Daniel walked around them like he was admiring a painting. "You two make quite the pair, a grieving widower and the daughter of the man who almost ruined me. Very poetic." Paul didn't move, but something in him was burning, steady and lethal. "Why did you take Elena?" Paul asked. Daniel's smile faded. He took a step closer, face inches from Paul's. "Because she found out I orchestrated your father's death," he whispered, "and she was going to expose me." The confession hit the room like a blade. Sonia felt the breath leave her lungs. Daniel straightened again. "I offered her a deal. She refused. I gave her a chance to leave quietly. She didn't take it." "You killed her," Sonia said, voice trembling. Daniel looked at her amused. "Now that I didn't say." Her stomach nodded. "Where is she?" Daniel smiled again. "Who knows?" Paul lunged before Sonia could stop him. He grabbed Daniel by the collar and slammed him against the wall. "You tell me where she is," Paul growled, voice shaking with rage. "You tell me right now." Daniel didn't flinch. He laughed. "Oh, cousin, always emotional." Sonia stepped closer, her voice ice cold. "You came here today for a reason.
What do you want?" Daniel fixed his shirt when Paul released him. He cleaned the shirt off his collar. "I came to warn you," he said casually. "The police might think they've found something, but they haven't. Not enough to charge me." Paul stared, fury radiating off him. Daniel continued, smiling at Sonia. "But you're becoming a problem too, and we both know how I deal with problems." Sonia felt adrenaline surge, but she stayed still. Daniel leaned in. "Be careful. Accidents happen, like falling chandeliers." That confirmed everything. Paul stepped forward again, voice colder than a freeze. "You will never touch her again." Daniel smirked. "We'll see." He walked out without hurry, as if the house belonged to him. When the door closed, the silence felt suffocating. Sonia exhaled shakily. "Paul, what do we do now?" Paul turned to her. He didn't hesitate. "We end this tonight." She nodded. Together, they went to the police with the video, the letter, the call logs, the family statements, and every document Elena had left behind. Hours passed, statements were taken, evidence cross-checked. For the first time, the case had weight. As dawn crept in, the detective returned with a firm look. "We are issuing a warrant for Daniel Wellington." Sonia's knees almost buckled with relief. Paul reached for her hand, and this time he didn't hide it. He held her openly, solid, certain. Outside the station, the sky was soft and pink with early light. Paul looked at her, tired but alive in a way she hadn't seen before. "Sonia," he said quietly, "I owe you the truth, the whole truth. I didn't want to need anyone again after Elena. But you didn't run." She met his eyes. "I'm not going anywhere." He stepped closer, something vulnerable flickering in his expression. "This marriage started as an agreement, a condition, a survival tactic for both of us." He paused. "But somewhere along the way, I started wanting it to be real." Her chest tightened. Warmth spread through her, surprising in its intensity. She held his gaze. "So did I." The morning sun found them standing close, breathing the same air, tethered by everything they survived and everything they were about to rebuild. Not a forced marriage, not a contract, not a consequence, a choice. Together.
Daniel was gone, this time for good, not into hiding, not into the next scheme, not lurking with another story or forged evidence. His arrest had been clean, final. The proof Paul found had shut every door Daniel could have slipped through. Elena's case was closed too. Sonia had read her final letter twice, then a third time, letting the truth settle. Elena hadn't died because she stopped loving Paul. She died because someone wanted Paul broken and controllable, and now that truth belonged to them both. Sonia turned toward him. "What happens next for us?" "Next?" Paul repeated, like he wanted to hold the word a moment. "Whatever we want, without rules, without conditions, without my family's ghosts in between." She didn't look away, and without fear. "That part," he said quietly, "I intend to make permanent." He reached for her hand. This time she didn't hesitate. His fingers threaded through hers with a steadiness that felt like a promise he'd built slowly, carefully, through every conversation, every argument, every hard truth they faced. A faint smile touched her lips. "You know people will talk about how fast everything changed. They always talk, but they never know the whole story." Her smile widened because he was right. No one saw the nights she questioned herself, or the mornings Paul stayed outside her door, too nervous to knock but unable to walk away. No one saw the moment he broke enough to tell her the truth about Elena, or the way she steadied him when he hated himself for it. No one saw how she found pieces of herself in this house she thought would swallow her whole. They had survived more than any couple should have had to. Not perfectly, not gracefully, but honestly. She leaned her head against his shoulder. He let out a breath she didn't know he was holding. "Paul," she murmured,
We should tell Ruth we're coming for dinner tonight. She'll worry. He made a quiet sound. She'll do more than worry. She'll claim she saved our marriage single-handedly. Sonia laughed, one of those real, unguarded laughs that warmed the air. It still surprised her how natural it felt to laugh with him now. Below them, workers were rebuilding the chandelier Daniel tried to weaponize. The estate was repairing itself, piece by piece. So were they. "Do you think," she said, voice calm, "do you think we'll ever feel normal?" Paul tilted his head, studying her. "Normal isn't what I want." "Then what?" He turned and kissed her forehead, slow and certain. "Real." For a moment, the world outside the balcony faded. No inheritance, no secrets, no ghosts. Just two people who survived the worst part of their story and were learning how to write the rest. Sonia looked at the sky, now clearing into pale blue. She squeezed his hand. "We'll make it real. Together." He nodded once, solid and sure. Together. As they walked back inside, the light caught them both, soft and warm, the kind of light that hints at something new beginning. And for the first time, the Wellington house didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a home.